There's a moment when the power goes out that most people never really think about. It doesn't start with chaos, it starts with silence. The hum of your home disappears, the lights go out, and for a few seconds, everything just feels still. Then the questions start. Is it just your house or is it the whole neighborhood? How long will this last? What do I need to do right now? So if your power went out right now, would you be prepared? Because backup power is not just about having a generator, it's about understanding what you actually need to run and for how long, especially if this turns into something that lasts for days or longer. So in this video, I'm going to simplify this. When it comes to whole home backup power, there are really four things that matter. How much power your home uses, how much power you can store, how much power your system can output, and how you manage that power over time. If you understand these four principles, everything else becomes a lot clearer. Then I'm going to walk you through 8 critical things I look for when evaluating whole home backup systems and show you how all of this works together in a real-world demonstration when the grid goes down. But first, let's cover a simple concept that makes everything else in this video much easier to understand. Watts. Let me show you how this actually works, because once you see it, everything else in this video is going to make a lot more sense. Right here, I've got a simple hot plate. Now, on the side of it, it says 1,000 watts. That means when it's running, it needs 1,000 watts of power. Now, this solar generator next to me can output up to 1,500 watts. So, since this hot plate only needs 1,000, this unit can run it without a problem. So that's the first piece. Watts. How much power something needs right now. Now, if you look around your house, you're going to see this number on almost everything. Appliances, devices, tools. You'll see a number with W next to it. And that tells you what it takes to run that device. So here's where most people get tripped up. Watts don't tell you how long something will run. For that, we need to look at energy. So now let's talk about watt hours. Watt hours tells you how much energy something uses over time, or how much energy your battery can store. Let's go back to our hot plate. If this is pulling 1,000 watts and I run it for 1 hour, that's 1,000 watt hours of energy used. Now, if I were to only run it for 30 minutes, that's half the time. So I use half the energy, about 500 watt hours. And that's the key idea. More time equals more energy used. Now, let's look at a few other examples that I have here in front of me. This light bulb only uses about 8 watts. So if I were to run it for an hour, that's just 8 watt hours. But this heat gun, well, that's a different story. It pulls about 1,800 watts, and you can see 1,800 watts here right on the side. So after 1 hour, it would use 1,800 watt hours. So now you can start to see how different devices affect your system. Now let's tie this all together. This unit can output 1,500 watts and it has a capacity of 1,000 watt hours. So let's now go back to our heat plate. Again, this needs 1,000 watts to operate. So yes, this unit can run this, but after 1 hour, the battery would be depleted. Now, what about this heat gun? It needs 1,800 watts, but this unit can only output 1,500. So it's not going to be able to run this device. Now let's look at our light bulb. It only uses 8 watts. So if we take the 1,000 watt hours of capacity and divide that by 8, you would get 125 hours of runtime. That's how long this could power this for. So once you understand these two things, how much power something needs and how much energy you have, everything starts to make sense. So let's take this one step further and answer the most common question I get all the time. How long will this power my refrigerator? But that's actually the wrong question. The better question is, how much energy does your refrigerator use in a day? In my case, my refrigerator uses about 0.9 kilowatt hours per day, or 900 watt hours each day. That's the number that matters, not just a wattage when it turns on. So if we were to go back to a system with about 1,000 watt hours of capacity, that's how much this battery can hold. That's roughly 1 day of runtime for my refrigerator. And this is where most people start to realize their current setup falls short. Now, up to this point, we've been looking at smaller portable units, but once you start thinking about powering more of your home, everything changes. Now you're looking at larger systems that can integrate directly into your home, with more capacity and higher output. So you're not just powering a few devices, you're actually supporting your home. And that's what I want to shift into next. 4 principles. Now, once you understand everything that we just covered, the basics of output and capacity, the next question becomes, how does this apply to your home? Because everything that we've spoken up to this point is theoretical, but in this section, I want to make it personal. So when it comes to whole home backup power, there are 4 things you need to understand before you start looking at systems. Number 1 is how much power your home uses. Let's start with this. How much power do you actually use? Most people don't know this, but your power bill tells you everything you need. If you look right here, you'll see the total usage for a month, and you'll also see my average daily use. In my case, I'm using about 47 kilowatt hours per day. That number matters more than anything else we're going to talk about, because this is your baseline. This is what your home actually consumes to function normally. Now, during an outage, it's very unlikely that you'll need to run everything, but this gives you a starting point to work from. The second thing is how much power can you store? Now that you know what your home uses, the next question is, well, how much energy can you store? And this is where battery systems come in. With a system like this, you're no longer dealing with small portable units, you're dealing with something designed to support your home. Each of these units stores a large amount of energy, and you can expand that over time by adding additional batteries. In my setup, I'm running 2 main units along with an expansion battery, which gives me significantly more capacity to work with. So now instead of thinking in terms of hours, you can start thinking in terms of days of usable power. But there's another piece to this that's just as important, and that's solar. Because storage alone is limited, but when you can recharge your system each day using solar, that's what starts to extend your runtime even further. Storage determines how long you last. Solar determines whether you can run out at all. And we're going to dive deeper into that in just a moment. Now, the third point is how much power can you output? Now, here's where a lot of people get tripped up because storage is one thing, but output determines what you can actually run. Think of it in this way. You might have plenty of energy stored, but if your system can't deliver enough power at once, you're not going to be able to run certain appliances. Most modern homes are built around a 200 amp electrical panel, and that's what supports everything in your house. Now, with a system like this, each unit can output a significant amount of power, and when you combine them into a smart panel, you can increase that output even further. And what that means is simple. More output equals more of your home that you can run at the same time. Less output means you're limited to just the essentials. We're going to take a closer look at how that smart panel works in just a moment. Number 4 is how you manage that power over time. And this is the part that most people overlook because it's not just how much power you have, it's how you use it. During the day, if you're connected to solar, you can recharge your system while you're using it. So that's when you want to run higher demand items. At night, when there's no solar input, you shift into conservation mode. You prioritize what matters: refrigeration, lighting, communication, climate control. And by managing your usage like this, you can extend your runtime significantly. Now, when you put all 4 of these together, this is where things start to click. Most people make one of 2 mistakes. They either underestimate their needs and they run out of power, or they overspend on a system they don't fully understand. But once you know how much you use, how much you can store, and how much you can output, and how to manage it, you can build a system that actually fits your situation. Now that you understand these 4 principles, we can move into the next step. Because once you start looking at real systems, there are a few critical things that separate a setup that works from one that fails when you actually need it. So next, I'm going to walk you through the 8 things I look for when evaluating a whole home backup system. And once you see these, you're going to start noticing very quickly why most setups fall short and how to avoid that. 8 things to look for. Now that you understand how power works, the next question becomes, how do you choose the right system? This is where things start to separate, because on the surface, a lot of these systems look similar, but when you actually break them down, there are a few key differences that determine whether a setup works when you need it or it falls short. Now, before I jump in, I do want to quickly mention that Jackery sponsored this video and provided the equipment that we're using here. But everything I'm going to walk you through applies to any system on the market. I also recently did a full comparison of whole home backup systems, and I'll link to it below if you want to go deeper. Now, I'm going to walk you through 8 things I personally look for when evaluating a system like this. I'm not listing these in any particular order, but each one plays a role in how well your system performs in the real world. The first thing I look for is automation, because in a real outage, you don't want to be figuring things out in the moment. With a system like this, everything is connected through a smart panel, what's often referred to as a critical load panel. That means specific circuits from your main electrical panel are moved over into this panel so they can be powered during an outage and used for peak load shaving, which we'll discuss in just a moment. Now in my setup, I've moved over several 15 amp circuits along with a 240 volt circuit for the oven. Not everything in the house is connected to the smart panel, just the critical loads that I want to maintain during an outage. So when the grid goes down, everything switches over automatically. And you don't have to deal with extension cords or manually setting everything up. And there are no decisions in the moment. And for a lot of people, especially if you have a family at home or you're away, that's a big advantage. The second thing is instant switchover, or UPS. The next thing is how fast the system reacts, because when the power drops, you don't want everything shutting off first. With the proper setup as a UPS, or uninterruptible power supply, the transition is essentially seamless. And you're not going to notice it. And that's what's important, because whether it's refrigeration, climate control, or anything else you're running, that continuity matters. As you can see here, I switched off the power going to the smart panel, and the system picks right up. You may notice a slight flicker depending on the load, but everything continues to run as the system draws power from the batteries. The next thing I look at is 240 volt capability. Most portable systems, which I've covered for years on this channel, are designed for smaller devices, but once you move into a whole home backup, you're dealing with larger loads. Things like ovens, HVAC systems, or a well pump. So when a system can handle 240 volts, you're no longer just powering a few devices, you're supporting your home. Also, in my latest comparison video of these whole home units, you're going to notice that I only reviewed systems that can natively output 240 volts. In the past, when these systems first came to market, you needed two of them tied together to output 240 volts. With these new units on the market, they can output 240 volts by themselves. And I actually use setups like that for this Barnuminium that I'm recording in here. And I noticed that some appliances didn't handle it well because the 240 volt wasn't really clean. But with these newer systems, that's no longer an issue. The fourth thing is load management, because it's not just about how much power you have, it's how you use it. With systems like this, you can prioritize circuits based on how much battery you have left through their app in the smart panel. For example, you could configure the app so that if the battery drops under 50%, the things that don't necessarily matter the most, say maybe the oven or mini split heating and cooling system, they're not prioritized, and instead the lights, a few wall sockets, and the refrigerator stay on. Now, if something like the mini split or oven is a priority, you can set it that way in the app. It's really up to you how you want to configure the circuits, but this allows you to prioritize what's critical to you. And by managing your load this way, you can extend your runtime significantly. The fifth thing is no noise or fumes, which gives you security. And a lot of people don't think about that. In a widespread outage, noise and fumes, they draw attention. Traditional generators, they are loud and they produce fumes, and they make it obvious that you have power. Now, systems like this, they run quietly indoors without drawing attention. And for a lot of people, that matters more than they realize. It's one of those things that are often overlooked, but depending on how long the power stays out, drawing unwanted attention to your house may not be a good idea. Now, the sixth thing is solar. Let's talk about solar because this is what changes everything. With solar, you're not just using stored energy in the batteries, you're actually replenishing it. During the day, you can generate power while you're using it. So now you're not just relying on your battery, you're extending your runtime. And like we talked about earlier, storage determines how long you last, and solar determines whether you run out at all. And the obvious advantage is that you're not reliant on a finite fuel source. I do realize some may opt for a whole home gas generator, and that's a valid option, but I know for my community, having a system that can run for months or even years without needing fuel is a major advantage. Now, point number 7 is expandability. Most people don't build a system like this all at once. You start with a base setup and then expand over time. With a system like this, once a smart panel is installed, you can continue adding capacity yourself. But you don't need to bring an electrician back to add another inverter or another battery. On the main house on this property, we have a typical solar setup done by a professional. It has an inverter and batteries that were permitted. And while it's a great setup, the downside is that I can't modify it without bringing an electrician. This setup can start with one unit, allows a second to be added, and then 10 additional batteries can be added as well, bringing the whole system to 60 kilowatt hours. The 8th point is ROI, or return on investment. And the last thing I look at is whether the system provides value outside of an emergency, because I prefer systems that actually get used, not just something that sits there waiting for an emergency. Depending on your setup and your local utility rates, systems like this can offset a meaningful portion of your energy costs over time. For example, you can shift your usage, charging from the grid when rates are low and using that stored power when rates are higher. So you're not just preparing for outages, you're improving your setup day to day. My setup is tied to both the grid and solar. So if the batteries go too low, let's say at night, or solar's not producing enough, it can be configured in the app to pull from the grid. With the current solar setup that I have, I don't need a pull from the grid, but have been able to produce everything I need for this house right from solar. Now, when you take all this together, this is what separates a system that works in theory from one that works in real life. So what I want to do next is show you exactly how this setup performs by simulating a grid outage and walking you through what actually happens when the system takes over. Grid outage test. Now that we've walked through what to look for in a system like this, let's put it to the test, because everything we've talked about up to this point is theory, and this is where we actually will see how it performs. Right now, the house is running normally. We're connected to the grid, the system is active, and everything is operating just like it would on any typical day. And what I'm going to do here is simulate a grid outage. Let's shut off the power coming from the grid. As you can see, the system picks up immediately, and the house continues running. You may notice a slight flicker depending on the load, but everything stays powered. And this is exactly what we were talking about earlier with automation and UPS. The system takes over and everything just keeps running. Now let's take a look at what's actually being powered right now. We've got the refrigerator running, lights throughout the house, and several of the critical circuits that were moved into the smart panel. Now let's take it even one step further. This is a 240 volt appliance, and as you can see, the system is handling it without an issue. Now let's look at the system from the app. This is where you can see what's happening in real time. You can monitor your load, see how much power you're using on each circuit, and adjust your priorities if needed. Now, here's where things get really interesting. We're running the house, and at the same time, we're bringing in solar. So instead of just draining the battery, we're actively replenishing it. And this is why I'm a big fan of solar. As long as you manage your load, you can effectively power your home for as long as needed without having to rely on fuel. Now, keep in mind that this setup is built around two main units, plus an expansion battery that are all connected through the smart panel. So this is not just a small backup solution, but rather a system designed to support critical loads in my home. And this is where load management really comes into play. If I needed to, I could reduce usage by turning off non-essential circuits in the app or simply turning those devices off. By doing this, we extend runtime even further. So during the day, when solar production is high, I'd run heavier appliances like the oven. Then, as night approaches, I'd start reducing load to make sure I can power critical items like the refrigerator through the night. So when you look at this in a real-world scenario, this is what matters, not just whether you have backup power, but whether your system is set up to handle your home the way you actually live in it. And that's what it looks like in a real-world scenario, not just having backup power, but having a system that's set up to support your home the way you actually live in it. From here, it really comes down to how you build your system around your needs. All right, let's pivot to a free tool that I made that will help you tie all this together. Before I walk you through this tool, let's address this question I get all the time. How do I power the things that are important to me, and how long can I power them for? First of all, to determine how much these devices need, you would probably need something like a kilowatt meter. You can pick these up at your local hardware store or online for about 20 bucks, or a very, very simple tool. And I'll link to it below. How do you use this? Well, you just take and plug this into your wall socket, and then the appliance that you're needing to power, you would plug it here into the front. Let's say your refrigerator, plug it in. All right, and then it'll come on, and you can go to a selection on here to show you kilowatt hours, or how much this is actually providing that refrigerator over that period of time. So let's say you run this for 24 hours, one day. What you could do is at the end of those 24 hours, you can come and look on here, and it will show you this refrigerator used, 1.1, 1.2 kilowatt hours, somewhere around that is just kind of a ballpark. But it will show you very quickly how much that refrigerator used for that period of time. Also, it will show in real time how many watts that device is needing to be powered. Those values are all very important because we can plug those into the spreadsheet that I've given you here. So let me walk you through this very quickly. Again, I'll link to this below. All right, so this is a file on a Google Drive. You're not going to be able to edit this. You would actually need to copy it to your own Google Drive, or you can download it to your desktop and open up a tool like Excel spreadsheets or something and put this in, and you can go through and edit it. If you're not sure how to set up a Gmail account or a Google Drive, just go on to Google, type in, how do I set up a Google Drive, and it'll walk you through that process. All right, now having said that, what are we looking at here? Columns S through T are the Jackery 5000, which we've been going over in this video. Now, we've pre-populated the values and specs for this particular device. It has one Jackery can output 7,200 watts continuously and has a surge of 14,400. Now, if you were to buy two Jackeries and plug them into the smart panel, you could double this number to 14,400. But at the moment, we're just considering one unit. All right, so if we scroll down here, again, we pre-populated a lot of these values. It's starting on row 32, you'll see the maximum surge capability of this unit. In this case, it's 14,400. Surge simply refers to some devices when they start, devices that have motors, they have an initial surge. What happens is it takes a certain amount of power to spin that device up. Your air conditioner, other things like that. They require a lot of surge to get them up and running. Once they start running, they slow down to continuous wattage. In this particular case, we're talking about surge. And again, we added this information. And when we talk about the other columns here in a second, we'll see what this plays in. Now, the next thing is recommended running watts. Typically, they recommend you want to push these devices at about half, around 50% continuously. The comparison is like an engine in your car. If you were to redline it all day, you could tear it up over time. You want to kind of push it around about half of what it can do on a daily, or rather, its continuous output. For this one, it can output 7,200 watts. So if you're running at about 3,600 continuously, you're well within the range. Again, that's a general rule of thumb. It's not something that has to be observed, but the general rule is if you're pushing a lot of power all the time, you want to go with a bigger inverter. Now, the next one is row 34, which is capacity. One Jackery 5000 has a capacity of 5,040 watt hours, or 5 kilowatt hours. And again, we talked about this earlier in the video where we talked about battery capacity and watt hours. I would again encourage you to go back and watch that part of the video if you haven't already. So what are we looking at here? All right, well, this is where it gets fun. If we were to go over and look at these columns, A through E, what we did is we added the typical things that a lot of people want to power, things like a refrigerator, a hot plate, a TV, a microwave. And again, these values can be edited on your own. Now, what we did is we pre-populated these values for you. What do I mean by that? Well, row 17 is probably going to be the most common one, a refrigerator, 18 cubic foot. Give or take in an hour, it's, well, let me back up here really fast. Column B shows how many watts it needs to run whenever you turn it on. So for this particular one, refrigerator, I put 100, but typically a refrigerator runs around 150 or so. The newer ones, refrigerators will pull about 150 watts. Now, if we were to come over here and look, we can select how long we want to power that. Oops, let me go up. I'm sorry, row 17. Let me highlight this one. We can say, well, I want one device, and again, column D allows you to select. Maybe you have two refrigerators, three, but in this case, we'll say one. Oops, I accidentally hit 0, and I'll go back to 1. Now, we can determine how long we want to power it for. In this case, we're going to say 8 hours. All right, so what happens? Well, if we go over to column S, again, we look and we see that equates after 8 hours of running at 200 watts each hour, that comes out to roughly 1,600 watt hours. Now, a refrigerator does not run all the time. It runs at around, 50% of the time during a daily usage. But again, that depends on climate, if it's cold in your house or hot, etc. So I'm going to bump this down to 100 just so we can kind of fudge the number to say, oh, okay, well, let's just, and again, a typical day, your refrigerator might use a little over a kilowatt hour of capacity, battery capacity. So again, you can play with these numbers, and again, you'll find that information using your kilowatt meter if you pick one of these up. Now, let's say, what else do we want to turn on? Let's say, again, the example of a coffee maker. I don't know, we're going to run it for about 5 minutes. We just have one of them, and that pulls 800 watts. All right, let's say our hot plate. We want to heat up some food. We're going to run one of those. We want to run it for 10 minutes. Now, you see what's happening over here is it's beginning to tell you in these column S, how much in watt hours, in our particular case, how much power is this device needing to run for, or, to operate for that full time? How much power is it going to draw from the battery? Well, in this case, we can see here these values are starting to add up. Now, when we scroll down to the bottom, the calculator will automatically update how much capacity is left in the battery. In our particular case, This one, after we operate these devices for the period of time that we selected, it's got 3,800 watt hours left. It's still got a lot left, starting out at 5,000. So what does this tell us? You can begin to quickly see how long can I power devices and how many. And again, the tool's intelligent enough that if you were to say, oh, I want to power, this and this and this, and these things draw a lot all at once, it's going to go into the red if it's saying you're going to, you're pushing things over. Let me give you an example. If we're to say, yeah, I want to run, 5 stovetops, which you're not going to want to do. If each burner pulls 1,500 watts, as you can see, it's now saying, okay, you overshot. You see it's in the red now because it can only output 5,000. So if I were to bump this number down to 3, now we're down at 4,500, which we put it in red if it's over the 50% of what it can do, because it's saying, yeah, you're kind of running on the high side. Now, again, if we were to bump this down a little more, let's just bring it down to 2, still, kind of a little high. But if I were to bring it down to 1, it's well within range. So again, you can push it past that 50% of what it can output. In this particular case, it can output 7,200. And again, we kind of numbered that and color coded it to kind of tell you what's in the range of what it's really designed for. And again, this unit can continuously output 5,000. So in an emergency, if you need to output 5,000 watts continuously, no problem, go for it. But hopefully this tool gave you enough information and insight to kind of play around with these values, and hopefully it helps you out. So at the end of the day, this really comes down to understanding your situation. How much power do you use, what actually matters during an outage, and how you want to approach it. Because there's not really a one-size-fits-all solution here. What works for one home may not make sense for another. But if you understand the fundamentals that we covered in this video and you take the time to really think through your own needs, you can begin to build a system that actually works when you need it. Whether that's something small and portable or a larger setup like what we covered in this video, the goal is not just to have another backup power solution, it's to have a plan. So hopefully this video gave you a clear way to think about all this and really helped you take the next step in building something that makes sense for you. If you're interested in any of the items that we covered in this video, I'm going to link to them below. As always, stay safe out there.